Shall I just give the camera a quick nudge?
And I'm recording my screen. But
Do you want it a bit more?
So
Got a shiny face. We're going to just deep shine it with a cushion.
Why don't you just go and make telly and do news and that?
All right, let's do it.
Hello and welcome to BBC R&D Explains, where we lift the lid on our big projects and chat directly to the people behind them. This is our third episode about a big project of ours called New Forms of Value. Catch up on episode 2 on that link, or here's a super quick recap of what we've covered so far.
What could people love the BBC for as well as radio and television?
What would it look like if you had a single store for all your personal data?
Over the next few months, we're going to be testing out a whole range of prototypes with as many users as possible.
In this episode, we're talking about the use of human values as a way to measure the success of content rather than views and clicks. With me again, I've got Bill Thompson. Tell us, the human values work, what is it all about, what's it involve, and why are we doing it?
We're doing this work because it's important that an organisation like the BBC has a way of measuring the impact it has on people's lives, and that we know that what we're doing is actually good for people. Nobody really knows what is the case with online services, just how to design them to be nurturing, to give people what they need to support their deeper psychological and human needs. So it's a sociological, psychological research that informs our engineering practice and our creative practice.
And I caught up with Lianne Kerlin, who's leading our work on human values. Lianne, thank you so much for taking some time out to tell us about your work.
hi Emma, nice to see you. It's really good to be here.
So the way things work at the moment, the BBC and other media organisations measure the success of their output through audience reach and time spent. Can you tell us why BBC R&D are now exploring human values as an alternative approach to measuring success?
So firstly, we asked what are the effects of and what are the impact of being driven by these measures, because we know that all we're doing is trying to maximize for these measures. What we see is that because it informs the way that the business operates, from commissioning process all the way to designing technology and ways to increase those figures, we see in the audience, we see an unhealthy relationship with content and with screen time, and we see a lot of problems in society with having too much screen time. There's lots of emotional, mental, physical impacts of having too much time watching content. I think all organizations out there are just aiming to maximize the time that people spend with their content or with their product or their service. So we take a step back and we say, we're public service. We don't need those same metrics. How should we measure value? How should we measure success? How should we measure the impact of our content and our services on delivering value to people? And this is where human values came in.
Thinking about the complexity of the human value system, I imagine there are a multitude of factors at play that feed into the perceived value we get from investing our time in a particular show or radio programme or online service. So how did you go about finding out what some of these core values are?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what sits behind those numbers of the time that people spend, the clicks and those things are really deeper things, deeper needs. So we investigated the human values through researching our audiences to really understand what they value. But we did this from a psychological sense. So we didn't just ask people what do they value. We dug really deep into understanding what their needs are and what their psychological, like very human needs.
So can you pick out a few of the human values you've identified and tell us a bit more about them?
Yeah, I'll give you some examples. So we have the very fundamental and most important human value of being safe and well, which links to our very core need to be well and to stay alive. Understanding oneself, and this is because psychologically driven to develop an identity. The value of exploring the world is underpinned by a need to explore and be curious this links back to days when the people that were the most curious stayed alive, and that's kind of come through.
So through this research, you've identified these 14 human values. So I guess the next thing is, what do we do with that new knowledge? How do we bring it into the design process? And you've developed this fantastic toolkit, the Human Values Toolkit, that helps us actively design for human values. So please tell us a bit about it.
So the toolkit was designed to help producers, designers, commissioners with the ideation process, with the innovation process, to put those human values at the heart of why we make things. So moving from design first, solution first, technology first, or even metrics first, to putting the human and those very fundamental human needs, human values first.
I've got to say, the toolkit is really useful for ideation. I've used it in workshops. I find it's great for getting people to think differently and to generate ideas that focus on varying subsets of the human values. Can you describe exactly what it is and how we use it?
So we have a set of value priority cards which help people to understand what value priorities their specific audience has, and this enables teams to understand more about the kind of most important human needs and human values for their specific audience. So then they can take 2 or 3 of these human values, like being safe and well, expressing myself, having intention. So it's getting people to look for new ways of doing things, new ways of working, thinking value first, being values driven.
Excellent. Well, it's really interesting stuff, and I know you're busy developing a set of psychometrics that will allow us to evaluate the things that we make. So what's the best way of keeping up with the work?
I think the R&D blog is a really good place to catch up with all the work. Currently on there we have a project page which outlines all of this work. We have the toolkit on there so people can go use it, which is really great because we'd love to hear how people have used it and their thoughts and feedback. That would be really great. And then coming up in the next few weeks, we'll have a series of podcast episodes that are going to come out where we talk to lots of external people about the human values, about psychometrics.
Ah, that sounds fab. I will look out for those. Lianne, thank you so much for sharing your work.
That's great. Thank you, Emma. Bye.
Okay, so Bill, that sounds absolutely fantastic, and it's a practical tool that we have that we'll be able to use going forward. It's not just theoretical. So do you think it's going to be useful going forward?
I really do. The work that the team have done is to make it something which you can put into the hands of people who are designing services, and they will pick it up quite quickly and be able to apply it in their daily practice. And it will help them make decisions. It doesn't do the work for them, but it will help people make decisions. And I think it will make a real contribution, not just to the services that we want to design within the BBC, but more widely. So yes, I think it's already having some practical applications.
So no matter how good the services are, we actually need to get them to people over the internet. And you're looking at that area as well, aren't you, Bill?
We are. That's one of the other big pillars of the new forms of value research. It's asking ourselves, what would an internet that was designed for public service look like? Because today's internet really supports the interests of commercial players or governments and other organisations like that. What would a public service internet look like?
Well, that's it for this episode. As always, let us know what you think in the comments, and please do like and subscribe. And tune in next time where we'll meet Ian Forrester, who is heading up the work on investigating the public service internet.